another edition of Talking Ball. We've got JD back on the program. We've got our first edition of a preview for the 2025-26 Duke season. And this time, we're looking at Countdown to Craziness. Just a few thoughts, ideas, different things we want to see from different players. JD, how are you doing? How's your summer?
It was great, but I have to say, this is all I was looking forward to from a sports perspective, being back with you, Jack, being back on Talking Ball, looking forward to the next Duke season. And for all of you who were with us last year, we had a great time. It was the Cooper Flag edition. We had a core group of followers that were a lot of fun. So, right up front, if you're joining us for the first time, please hit the subscribe button. And what else do we tell them in the beginning, Jack?
And just like this video, that always helps with the algorithm. If you're not ready to subscribe, just hit the like button. We always appreciate that. So, yeah, I think this is going to be another fun season of Duke basketball. And let's start looking at it. I guess the one thing I want to say, though, before we jump right into it is, we do have Red Sox-Yankees today in the wild card game. For as much as we get along during the Duke basketball season, during the baseball season, we are on opposite sides. And my Red Sox, I don't think we're favored in this series. But tonight with Crochet on the bump, I got a good feeling about this game one for sure.
Let's face it. Let's tell the story of your mother converting you and your sister when I'm a diehard Yankee fan and your mother comes from Connecticut, where you could go either way.
Yep.
Her father was a Yankee fan, and it was in a small store in Wellfleet, Massachusetts, when you were just a youngin', that you all came out wearing those almost the same color shirt you have on now that said Boston Red Sox on the front. Mm-hmm. And I said, no.
Well, more importantly, what did it say in the back?
Because your mom said 1, 2, 3, turn around. It was those T-shirts that say, I root for two teams, the Boston Red Sox and anyone that beats the Yankees.
And tonight, I think it's going to be a perfect combination of those two things. The Red Sox will beat the Yankees, and we'll move right into this. So I think for the Blue Devils, and, this season where we've got the Boozers coming in. Last year was all about Cooper Flag and Con Knipple and really the whole starting five. And this year we've got the Boozers, which is, you just mentioned a story of when I was, 5 or 6 years old. And I think that's a great segue because this team with the Boozers on it is the first time where I can remember watching Carlos Boozer. And now we'll have Cameron and Caden on this team. And I think that's going to be a cool storyline to follow. We'll see, I'm sure, a lot of Carlos Boozer at the games this year.
But Jack, do you have a theory on Cameron Boozer's name?
I don't think it's a theory. We're 90% certain. And if you guys have a link, an article, drop it in the comments. He's named after Cameron Indoor. And I think that's a good way to start. Is for me, the first question I had, not necessarily the most important, but the first one is just, how does Cameron Boozer look? This is a guy who is he's got one of the best pedigrees in high school basketball. He's one of the top 3 players in this year's class. What does he look like? I don't think we're going to know everything, but maybe we'll know a little bit, right, about him, a little bit more about him after this inter-squad scrimmage. But maybe not. We certainly won't know everything. We got to see them tested, which we'll see later on this month.
Looking forward to the Champions Classic, which is usually that one of the early tests there. And so Duke has Kansas. And though Kansas is ranked 21,
21st.
Yeah. nonetheless, it'll be one of those early, lot of hype, Madison Square Garden, Boozer Twins there. It'll be fun to see him running with another college team.
Well, before then, you've got two exhibitions with UCF and then Tennessee, which I think is going to be a great matchup. And before the games even count, first game against Texas, so there's going to be lots of opportunities for that. Just just curious, what does he look like out there? And I think what will help us get a better sense of that is how competitive are they in this scrimmage? Because last year, I remember when we did this, thinking like, wow, they were playing a lot harder than we thought they were going to. And so I think that's going to be something to look for this year. And then lastly, before we break it down between the returners and the freshmen, is Malik Brown playing? Because I don't think he's going to play based off the report. And it's not the shoulder anymore for those of you guys who may not have heard. He had a scope done on his knee and was supposed to be out a few weeks. So it'd be really promising if he was part of this, but I got a feeling they're going to hold him out for now.
Well, and if it's recovery from the scope on his knee, it just gives his shoulder another month.
True. Which, from what I remember hearing, they said the shoulder is all good now, but for Malik, considering that happened twice last year, you want to give him even extra time.
Absolutely.
All right. So the returners. These are just a couple of notes. Again, are we going to learn these questions that I have in Countdown to Craziness? No, but I guess these are things I'm going to look forward to or look for during this and then along with the other exhibitions that Duke plays. And number one for me is Caleb Foster's decision-making. He went from the starting point guard at the beginning of the season last year to a guy who was coming off the bench productively, I would say, at the end of the year, but in a very different role as a guy who's like a spark plug defensive guard. And I think his decision-making ultimately cost him his starting job, and that's going to be the biggest thing for him. Can he be more dependable with the ball? And I think what I really mean by that is two things. There are times where he will over-dribble, and that gets him into trouble. And then last year, as the season went on and his confidence kind of waned, there were times where he was turning down shots. And I think if he can improve those two things in particular, it will help him get more playing time and it will help this Duke team.
So I don't know. It's just one of those things. I don't know. He may mature in a way that we're all going to go, that is just awesome. And at the moment, having his own confidence challenged as much as it was last year, though a pretty obvious change. We weren't the only ones suggesting that how long will you go with Caleb Foster as the starting guard? And Sion James was such a perfect fit. His size, not going to rattle him. And they had Cooper Flagg. So it was like, yes, you just got to get the ball up the court. And then, Cooper's going to help distribute it. In this case, if it's not going to be Caleb Foster, then it gets interesting as to who will be the point guard. The obvious choice is Cameron's brother. And he's waiting to go. So is Caleb Foster in the same situation that he was last year? And is that the little gremlin in your head that's talking to you saying, I got to handle this? So I don't know that we learned much during Countdown to Craziness when the strobe lights are going, but that is clearly one of the big storylines. So yes. You're right to sort of point that out.
Yeah, I completely agree. How much of that will we learn? Like I said, I think we'll learn more about that in the exhibitions than in Countdown. But it'll be fun, to look at. One thing, though, we might learn in Countdown is the most recent podcast was Mr. Foster and Isaiah Evans, Slim. And in that thumbnail, Slim looks like he's 4 inches taller than Foster. And I remember him being listed at 6'6", and that would, to me, have him listed at like 6'8". So that's the one thing I think we could learn is, does Isaiah Evans look noticeably taller? They did add, a little bit of weight. And the one thing I wanted to mention on Foster, I forgot about this, was Coach Dildy was talking about him. I don't know what it was, some sort of press conference type thing. And he said about Caleb Foster, he said he's completely changed his personality. He went from a guy who's like a quiet kind of guy to like an outspoken leader, and he thinks he's going to have a really big season. Now, how much of that is going to end up transpiring, and how much of that is their coach, his coach trying to pump him up before the season, remains to be seen. We just don't know. And I think that's going to be a common theme
So
here.
I'd say, though, on a positive note,
Yeah.
for Caleb Foster, he has the skills within him to be the point guard and start. Good defender. It's going to be a question of, as you said, his decision making, and it's the little gremlins that talk to you on the court. This is Duke. Can't make a bad set of games here. They'll quickly take me off, and that I think this is a mental issue as much as it is a physicality and his ability to be on the court. So that's Caleb.
Yes. Mr. Gangba, the one thing I'm curious about in this game, and I guess we'll talk quickly about both the Paul VI guys, is does he shoot the three? I remember seeing him in high school shooting the three ball a little bit. Didn't see that at Duke last year, albeit he had a little bit of limited playing time. But that's something, especially in this is one thing where in this environment, I think it's more possible than in a real game for him to show that off, or at least try to show that off as part of his game.
I love the game that he played last year. Now, that's not going to get him into the NBA because he's going to need the three ball, no question. And with Malik coming in to, let's say, trade off time in the center spot, I think Patrick's going to have to show us if he can shoot from three, but it may mean that the spacing on the floor is going to be different, and it's going to allow Gangba to be closer to the basket, where I love his game. Game.
It's an addition to me. Can
Right.
he add that to his game? Because his skill, his footwork around the rim, his touch around the basket, he's going to have a really good year. It's just a question to me, like you said, that would help him moving on to the next level. Can he be a little bit more versatile? Darren Harris, I'm looking for, does he just look confident? I've noticed that some of the clips over the summer, he just seems more confident about his game, having been there now a year. He's no longer a freshman. I think that's going to help. And I think, you mentioned the spacing with Gangba. Like, if Darren Harris can play enough, and I think one of the things that held him back, which was similar with Evans, was the defense. And we know how much Scheyer values that side of the court. So if he can play defensively, his shooting, it's up there with the best on the team. Probably him and Evans. It's going to be hard to dispute between those two guys. And they really would command teams to, you can't help off of those guys. And that frees up everyone else to have more space, more driving lanes, more space for Gangba, more space for Boozer. So I think that's going to be something to watch from Darren Harris. Now you mentioned Caden Boozer a little bit earlier. It's going to be fun to watch the battle in the backcourt between him and Caleb Foster. And as you said, it's a very similar situation as last year, albeit, Boozer is not the veteran that Sion James was when he came to Duke, but he has a real high pedigree, and he's a pass first point guard. And there's ultimately a world where they both start, but I do think realistically it's going to be a competition between those two guys.
I think Caden is going to look. He and his brother are used to being the stars, and it'll be okay for him for the beginning of the season to say this is Caleb Foster's opportunity to show himself. But it's going to be hard on Caden to not say, Coach, put me in. I got this. I got this.
He seems ready. He seems ready. And I think they'll play together for sure. It's just a question of I just don't think they'll both start, but a lot of that is going to depend on the wings. Like how good are Evans and Harris, and then how good are Dame Sarr and Nick Hamenia, who I think depending on how well they play will dictate does Duke want to. And a lot of this is we just don't know. We just don't know. Like how well is Foster going to play? But I think Sarr and Hamenia in particular. Hamenia seems to have more of an ability to affect the game in a multitude of ways. Like he can pass, he can shoot. Sarr seems more of like your scoring type wing. So I think they're going to have like different roles. And I think like depending on who starts between those two guys, like Hamenia might be better with Foster because Hamenia can add some playmaking next to maybe more of a score first guard in Foster. But maybe Sarr is better with Caden Boozer because Sarr's going to more look to score and Caden's more of a pass first type point guard. So I think you could see some different lineups based off of that as well.
There is this, when you play in a schoolyard game and you're with a lot of other really good players, but you got your best friend out there and you've been playing together for years, you know where he's going. Yes. You don't, there's just, so having Caden and Cameron on the court at the same time, the communication between the brothers is something you can't substitute for. They know what each other wants to do without anyone calling the play or doing anything differently. And so this is one of those strange situations where Caden can be more effective with Cameron than Caleb could be because Caden knows exactly. He's been doing it for years.
Yes.
Exactly what, it's not even going to be like an eye look. It's going to be, he just has to, he's in motion and Caden knows where his brother's going to be. And that is a very effective weapon that Duke has going into this year. As we say, you couldn't replace, our man, Cooper Flack. You couldn't replace him, but you might have been able to replace him with two guys.
Yeah, maybe. But, I think also it's going to be about how this team, the rest of the guys gel. Because if you remember last year, it wasn't just Foster. It was a collective, the first 8 to 12 games or so, where if you remember, there were after several games, even wins, where we would come on and say, especially you, would say, are they going to run plays? Like the offense has no flow. Remember that?
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, about midway through the season, the offense started to click a little bit. And by the end of the year, the offense was really flowing. And that was a great illustration of how Scheyer wanted the team to play. He wanted to give them the freedom in the beginning, so by the end of the season, they were really connected. And that's the thing that, the Boozers are going to have right away. and it's just a question of how quickly will the collective gel. Will they be able to do it maybe sooner than last year's team, or will it take more time? And we're gonna just have to see on a game to game basis, because I think now in year 4 of Scheyer, we know how he's going to coach. He's going to be defense first, and then offense. He's got principles, but he wants guys to be able to play freely. He doesn't really want to call a ton of plays until he gets to certain big games, and then he wants Cooper to have the ball, and this year it'll be Cameron to have the ball, and he's going to say, you stand here, you go there, and he'll dictate a little bit more. But he really likes the free flowing, and that's going to take chemistry. So I think maybe to circle back into countdown, that is one thing we could pick up on just a little bit, is do some of the other guys have chemistry together? Do they seem to be having fun playing with one another?
I think they will. And to backtrack again about the trajectory of a team, Knippel is really a really good example of how good was Knippel going to be. Did you have him going as high in the draft on day one? And then he looked like he couldn't miss in the early games. And then he went to, I don't know, is this really a guy, to being the absolute dependable number 2 to Cooper Flagg. And obviously people a lot smarter than us looked at him and said, no, we're taking this guy. What did he wind up, Jack? Number 5, number 6?
4, I want to say.
I mean, so some of this is obviously, yes, it's fun for Countdown to Craziness. It's like, I mean,
I'm excited. I'm just excited. It's going to be fun. We got the season started. It's unofficial kickoff. But this year it's like the second unofficial, because they did that open practice. So we got a little bit more. We saw Scheyer be like, he was pretty pleased with Caden Boozer. There's a couple of moments where he wanted Caleb Foster. By the way, it's going to be a tough season for JD, guys. Just saying, Caleb, Caden, Cameron. It's just too much. Just too many names.
Wait.
Hymenia. Oh, Hymenia. You're going to say Dame, guys. He's going to say Dame. It's Dame. We know. But he's going to say Dame. Just let it go. The only other thing I wanted to say on the players is I thought Sebastian Wilkins, which is only one of the 10 guys who I expect to get real minutes, we didn't touch on yet. He made I thought it was a pretty cool comment. They were asking, I forget what the question was, which would make this a lot better. But they were like, there was one video, and Wilkins said basically that his style was to try to make others better. That's what he wanted to do, is that he was coming in to try to make everyone else better. And I thought, as a guy who's the last addition to this team, as somebody who reclassified, I always had the dream. It's pretty cool. He has a picture of when he was, I think, like in middle school at Cameron, and now they took a picture of him in the same spot. So this is a guy who, it was his dream to go and play basketball at Duke, and that's his mentality. Just make his teammates better. So I think that'll be cool to watch, because I think between Malik Brown staying on the court and Gongbump maybe having some foul troubles, and maybe Cameron Boozer, there's going to be opportunities in the front court for this team where there's maybe not as much in the back court, where they're a lot deeper. So, let's see what we got in a guy like Sebastian Wilkins. Seabass, as they call him.
So I'm going to say that the player that I am looking the most forward to is not the Boozer twins. And it is not like the shooters like Darren Harris. It will be fun to see if Isaiah Evans, slim to you guys, quick draw to me, can absolutely do it consistently over, night after night, as opposed to that phenomenal run early on in the season where he earned all his, reputation. when he had 6 3-pointers in the first half, I think. But my favorite player is Malik Brown, because as much as Cooper Flagg would, do things and you'd look forward to the offense of Cooper Flagg, we were out of our minds at how a guy could affect the game from the defensive position, and not just blocking shots, but deflections. This guy has this uncanny ability to use his reach and to deflect the ball more than I do not know another college basketball player that is in that position. Yes, obviously, you have the big guy, don't come under here. We're going to, smack the ball away. But he was doing it in midcourt, around the top of the key. And it was like, how did he get to that? And so it didn't show up always until finally people were, the announcers on ESPN were finally saying deflections. And we were looking at it all year going like, how does this guy get his hand on everything? And so he is the guy that is the big it won't work on offense, but I'd love to see if he and Gangba could be paired on defense, because that is a brutal combination, especially with Cameron Boozer then taking up a lot of territory. That is one strong defense. And that brings me back to something you wanted to bring up, which is there was this magical 5 because of their height.
Yes.
So why don't you hit on that, Jack?
Well, and we'll wrap up here. I don't think. Before I jump into that, part of the reason I brought up Gangba shooting threes is because I think if him and Brown can, because Malik also, he did shoot threes, and he especially when he came back from his shoulder injury, he was more confident, especially that North Carolina game. He hit 2 huge threes. They were like game savers. And if those guys can shoot threes, they don't have to shoot a ton, but if they can shoot them, I think you can play them together, as you just said. And I think you can play one of them with Cameron Boozer, and you can have a nice 3-man rotation between your power forward and center spots there. And then also, shift some guys down. But I don't think this lineup will ever happen. It was just a fun one for me to put together, where if you go Jimenia as your de facto point guard, Dame Sarr at the 2, we'll say Malik Brown's your 3, Cameron Boozer's your 4, and Gangba is your 5. No one is shorter than 6'8", and Gangba is your tallest guy at 6'11". You've got 2 guys who are around 250 pounds. That would be I would just play zone, put them in a zone. That way nobody, those smaller guards who are going to be, always give Duke problems, but you put them in a zone, just, see what happens. If for whatever reason, knock on wood, there's ever a game with Foster and Boozer both in foul trouble, and Evans also is in foul trouble, maybe you throw that out there, but I don't think it'll ever happen. Just a fun one for me.
Well, and there's one other thing about the Duke team this year. Among the guys, the 5 first-round draft picks, or 4 first-round draft picks and 1 second-round draft pick, I think.
3 first rounds, 2 seconds.
3, okay. Like you said, I'm going to definitely have some problems, as usual. But it's okay. Everyone knows where I'm getting at.
You're close enough. Siakam was close.
But who is the fan favorite who seemed to have been on Duke for 12 years that's no longer there?
That's a great point. Spencer Hubbard.
It made the fans love the final 2 minutes of the game. Bring Spencer in, and he would score. And, not dominant, but he would score, make some good choices. So who will emerge hopefully as, I mean, maybe that took a number of years for
Yeah,
that to,
yeah.
but to have the fans go crazy in a college game because a bench player is coming in the final 2 minutes, and fortunately, as opposed to the legend Coach K, John Scheyer was willing to say, we're going to give you a couple of minutes each game if we're ahead.
I do remember Coach K giving minutes to Zafarofsky. Um, he was a crowd pleaser for sure. But you're right. It is there's we're not going to be able to replace Hubbard this year. You
Nope.
know, we
No.
might be able to replace Cooper Flag with Cameron Boozer to an extent, but there's nobody who's going to replace Spencer Hubbard, and he will be missed. And I think that's a good place to wrap up here. You've got dog training coming up in a couple of minutes, and we will see you guys post. I was gonna say post game. That doesn't seem right. Post scrimmage. Post countdown to craziness. Friday night live. Until then, peace.